Welcome to Lesson 1, Knowledge is Power, Understanding Disposition Choices. The choices that we make relating to our final wishes are highly personal. We all have different preferences. You may prefer traditional burial, while others lean toward cremation or natural burial. The key is understanding your preferences and knowing the options that align with your personal feelings, values, and finances. We're going to spend some time looking at the options that are currently available and what each involves. Many today are increasingly concerned about our environment, so we will also be looking at the environmental impact of each option. We're going to start with what most of us would consider to be the traditional path. This is the funeral that we've seen time and time again in movies and TV, and you've likely attended this kind of funeral. In this path, a person dies. They are quickly taken into the care of a funeral home. The body is prepared and embalmed for viewing. A service is held either in the funeral home or in a church. The body is then transported to the cemetery, and a graveside service is held, followed by a burial. Let's expand on some of the elements of that process, the things that you should be aware of. We'll start with embalming. Embalming is a process used to preserve a deceased body, delay decomposition, and enhance its appearance for viewing. The goal of embalming is to slow decomposition. The process doesn't permanently preserve a body. The body is still going to decompose. That is the nature of organic matter. To accomplish this, the bodily fluids are flushed from the body and replaced with a formaldehyde-based chemical mixture. The fluid is generally tinted with dyes, and that's going to give the body a more lifelike coloring. The natural bodily fluids that have been flushed from the body are disposed through the community wastewater system. It should be noted that embalming is not required by law. However, some funeral homes do have a private policy that if you're going to have a viewing, embalming is prerequisite. If you don't like the process of embalming, one of the questions that you need to ask a funeral provider before you hire them is their policy on embalming. Again, embalming isn't required by law, so there may be flexibility with the policy. A couple more notes for consideration. Embalming fluid is toxic to humans, and there are occupational hazards related to chemical exposure for the person who performs the embalming. The complications range from eye, nose, and throat irritation to higher risks of certain cancers. Another consideration. In recent years, eco-friendly alternatives to traditional embalming fluid have been developed that are plant-based. So if you feel like embalming is an important step but are worried about the chemical footprint, ask about greener options for embalming. I recently was working with a funeral home, and when I asked, that was, in fact, an available option. We didn't end up choosing to embalm, but it was nice to know that it was available. Moving forward, for many, there is historical attachment to the idea of being buried amongst the generations that have come before. We have a beautiful historical cemetery in the town where I live. As you wander, you'll see names that are associated with our community, family names that have been associated with lakes, well-known establishments. The idea of joining your final resting place with the history of an area or the history of your family might be very appealing. Another benefit of traditional burial is that it creates a physical memorial that loved ones can visit, and that might be important to you. In addition to the chemical impact of traditional burial, other environmental considerations are consumption of resources, both for the burial itself, as well as resources consumed to keep cemeteries aesthetically pleasing. In the United States, we purchase plots for perpetuity, so perpetual land use is something that you may wish to consider. Our last two considerations of note: the traditional path is available in all states, and it is generally the most expensive option for disposition. Cremation is currently the most common body disposition in the United States. Many are choosing cremation for simplicity, flexibility, and budget considerations. In our modern world, it's not uncommon for family and loved ones to be living far away from each other. So, from a practical standpoint, a cremation can take place and the memorial can be scheduled at a time that is best suited to the needs of loved ones. Cremation is not considered a green disposition method. The process consumes resources and pollutants are released into the air. Here's a little side note on cremation. People are getting really creative when it comes to the cremains, or what's otherwise known as ashes. They can be compressed into a diamond. If you're a music lover, ashes can be added into a vinyl record, turned into beautiful smooth stones, jewelry, or other mementos. The list is endless. Additionally, there are some really unique and interesting urns out there. If you're a big reader, you can have an urn that looks like a book. If you want to be scattered in the water, there are dissolving urns. If you like the simplicity and flexibility of cremation, but you would prefer a more sustainable option, water cremation creates the same final outcome as far as cremains or ashes, but the process is more environmentally friendly. Water cremation goes by a number of names: aquamation, water cremation, flameless cremation, but the official terminology is alkaline hydrolysis. The process consumes less energy compared to traditional cremation and doesn't produce the harmful gases associated with flame cremation. Water, heat, and alkaline chemicals are used to break down organic tissue. When the process is complete, clean white bone fragments will remain and will be broken down further in the same manner as traditional cremation. So the end product will be the same as flame cremation, with the exception that the ashes will be whiter in color. The liquid from this process is sterile and can be safely discharged into the community wastewater system. Many people are really drawn to this option, but it isn't currently available in every state. That is changing rapidly as state legislators adopt new legislation to satisfy the demand of the public. Up next, we have natural organic reduction, otherwise known as human composting. I have seen a variety of sensational reports on this method. Maybe you have too. So let's talk about how this process works. When a person dies, they are taken into the care of a funeral provider that offers natural reduction. There will be no embalming. The body is placed in a vessel along with organic materials like straw, wood chips, and other plant-based materials that will help with the natural decomposition process. Loved ones can participate in this part of the process if they choose to. It's similar to holding a private viewing. Over the next several weeks, the vessel will be in a controlled environment that promotes the transformation of the organic materials into soil. After the decomposition process is complete, any remaining bone fragments will be processed similar to the fragments that remain after cremation, and then they will be added back into the soil. When the entire process is completed, the resulting soil can be donated to a conservation project or used for a personal project like a memorial garden. Like alkaline hydrolysis, natural organic reduction is not yet available in every state. But state laws are changing rapidly, so even if it's not available now, your state may adopt legislation in the near future. For those who are drawn to full body burial but want a more environmentally friendly version, this is for you. I live in Montana and I frequently refer to this as cowboy burial. I've been raised around farms and ranches and cowboys, and I can't tell you how many times I've heard an old rancher say, "Just dig a hole and throw me in it." That's what green burial is, with a bit more refinement. Green burial is meant to be as gentle on the environment as possible. A body is placed in a shroud or a simple wooden casket and buried. No embalming, no burial vaults, no non-biodegradable materials, only unfinished wood, willow, or natural fibers. No barriers preventing the earth from naturally breaking down the body. Many find the idea of allowing our body to become part of and to provide nourishment for our environment a very appealing idea. These concepts are catching on, and many cemeteries are adapting to meet public demand. Some are taking steps to become hybrid cemeteries, meaning that they offer green burial throughout the cemetery or perhaps have a section dedicated for the purpose. Additionally, there are natural burial cemeteries and conservation cemeteries that only allow green burials. Natural cemeteries are beautiful. They often resemble just a lovely place where you would want to take a nature walk. You wouldn't know that people have chosen to be buried there if you weren't already aware of it, because they don't typically allow traditional headstones. Occasionally, you'll notice a memorial stone that marks a burial, but that is all. Green burial often includes an element of community involvement. You may not be familiar with the idea of being involved in the burial of a loved one, so let me give you a practical example of what this may look like. As I mentioned, I grew up around ranches, farms, and cowboys. We had friends that owned this big, beautiful ranch, and eventually the owner, who was this tall, handsome, just square jawed, he was the quintessential cowboy. He died, and he wanted to be buried on the ranch. So after the memorial service, there was a graveside service, and his spunky little widow announced to all that were gathered there that if they would like, they could grab a shovel and bury their friend. She explained that he would be buried one way or another. It's either going to be by machinery or it's going to be by the hands of his friends, and he would prefer to be buried by friend. And so it went. The cowboy was buried by hand by his loved ones. It was a meaningful tribute that friends could perform, and in return, it was a gift for those longing to help in a time when we tend to feel powerless. That brings us to our last option, which is science. People choose to donate their body to science for various reasons, and the decision is often based on personal values and a desire to contribute to medical education and research. Some view body donation as a way to leave a lasting legacy and make a positive impact on society. It's an altruistic choice that allows individuals to contribute to the well-being of future generations, even after their passing. For others, it's a financial consideration. Many donation programs cover the costs associated with final disposition, which makes it an affordable option. The time has come for you to put your knowledge to use. Move on to the next section and get ready for your first assignment.